Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Code to Cloud. Today, I've got Bart from the CNCF. I mean, you're a big contributor to the CNCF, but it's not your day job, right, Bart? Do you want to just quickly
Probably have to
introduce
unpack
yourself?
that a little bit, but yeah, I do a lot of things. I do collaborate with the CNCF, but I'm not like an official employee there.
Okay. So I made a hash of that introduction, by the way. But literally, when you go on the internet and you search it for Bart, right, just check it right with the CNCF. So he's a buddy and technically a colleague of mine, right? Because we're both ambassadors, right? So, Bart, do you just want to introduce yourself? Tell folks what you do.
Happily so. My name is Bart Farrell. I am a freelance content creator, specialized in the cloud native area. I work on podcasts, events, videos, supporting different open source projects that are in the CNCF ecosystem, as well as companies that are participating there. I am the host of a podcast called CubeFM, and that's my primary focus as the last 2 years.
Very popular podcast, by the way, right? Something I listen to as well. So you're a freelance content creator. That sounds like a very freedom role. I kind of like the idea of that. So do you just get to work on stuff that you want to do, or do you take on contracts? Like, how does it work?
It's a great question. And it's something that I didn't, wake up one day, 10 years ago and say, this is what I want to be doing. It's kind of a position that sort of found myself in over time. And I feel like it's the sort of balance between three different elements. So there's what are the things that I'm good at doing? What are the things that I really enjoy doing? And what are the things that I can get paid to do? And so finding the balance between those three things. And when you really hit the sweet spot of things that you like, things that you're good at, and that you get paid to do, then it's really nice. And it took a lot of trial and error to get to that point. But I do really enjoy what I get to do, and I don't imagine myself doing anything other than that now at this point. I did work for companies full time in the past, but it's something that, so like I said, just sort of grew out of different experiences and being able to combine different things that I was working on. And so now I've been a freelancer, say, for the last 7 to 8 years.
I mean, you've passed the halfway point on that. There's no going back, right? Like once you've done a couple of years of it, yeah, it's pretty hard to go back into effectively working for someone else, right? And taking their direction. So I want to touch on that a little bit more as we get down the road, right? Because I'm really interested on how that works for you day to day, right? And how you got it. But like, I want to talk about Bart's origin story, right? Because you're based in Europe now, but you're originally from the US, right? From memory, if I got that right. Do you just want to talk in a little bit of that? Like, how did you break into tech? How did it all come about?
Well, the origin story is that two very brave people, known as my parents, decided that two children weren't enough and they wanted a third. And so I was born in 1985, which for some people listening to this might sound like, eternity. Maybe for others, not as long.
Not for
But
me.
I'm originally, as you mentioned, I'm originally from the United States. I'm from Northern California. I'm from a city called Santa Rosa, but my family now live in Vallejo, which is closer to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I finished my undergraduate degree in 2008. I got my undergraduate degree in religious studies, so humanities focus. I had two roommates that were computer science majors, so I remember hearing about Boolean logic and learning about how to program in C, and some of their experiences working on the computer lab on campus. And I think that's also definitely got my first contact with Reddit, which has stayed as part of my life since then. But after graduating, I worked in different jobs. I worked as a teacher and in California, as well as then later in Egypt. And then through that, ended up living in Spain. Moved here 13 years ago. It'll be 14 years in August. Worked as an English teacher for 4 years, and then because of a YouTube channel that I created, first about showing really silly things about how to learn English, but then more about my experience living as an American in the north of Spain in the Basque Country, where I've been living for the last 13 years. That caught the attention of a British software development company that was looking to hire someone to help them out with talent management and things around communication, because they had different development centers and wanted to organize events. And I didn't know anything about working at a tech company at that point, but it was too good of an opportunity to say no to. And so I was there for 3 years, very fast paced environment, and learned a lot. And it was in 2018 that that company I was working with, they started playing around with Kubernetes, and I didn't know that that was going to become a very important part of my life later on. But it was just by coincidence that I had my desk next to where the at that point they were called IT Ops team was located. So I learned about all the problems that they had been dealing with. They moved from on-prem to Azure in a 3-month migration that was pretty crazy in terms of the amount of people that were involved. And I got to learn a lot about the decision-making processes behind which technologies they would be using. At that point, also, Apache Mesos was a lead contender in the container orchestration wars, and so I got to see all that sort of from the inside, not realizing that was going to be very important for me later on. But that's how I got into tech.
That is there was a common theme there, right? Teacher, educator, right? Which is obviously fed into what you do today, right? And what you've been doing over the past like decade or so, right? By the sounds of things. But yeah, that's quite a contrast, right? Like people normally, when they come on the show, they talk about when they got their first computer, right? And a similar age to us, right? It was in the 90s, right? And they talk about how to dial up and all that kind of stuff. But you were a teacher first and foremost, right? So you were teaching in California. You went to Egypt, which is on my bucket list. That must have been a vast contrast, right? Going from California to Egypt. What were you teaching in Egypt? Was it English again, or was it just general
Yeah.
studies?
So when I was in Egypt, I was teaching English to refugees from South Sudan, and that was particularly different because it was teaching people that not only were absolute beginners in English, but for some of them English was their first written language because they spoke Arabic, but or other languages in addition to that, but weren't written languages. So that brought additional challenges. But I've something I've repeated, and I actually posted about this recently on LinkedIn, is that I've learned to really enjoy being in environments where I very much have the beginner's mind and have to use all the creativity and all the resources at my disposal possible to connect with folks. And I was lucky enough that the young men that I was teaching English to really enjoyed hip hop music. And so we sort of had common ground through that and looking at Tupac lyrics. And that was like our bridge where we found something that they were passionate about. And so then learning English wasn't so much about, oh, this boring subject that's really difficult. It's going to take me a really long time. But it was something that they could enjoy. And so I think that that's something that I previously sort of found before, but really found it at that point. And it's definitely stuck with me ever since then. And it's not just limited to teaching English in a different country, but helping people find ways to celebrate the things that they're learning, despite the fact that they're challenging, and making things more relatable is something that definitely stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, there's that point in time, right, where one, you realize that you don't know, and then you figure how much you really don't know about that subject, and then you start like you said, finding resources, right, to sort of aid that journey. I think that's common across any learning path, right? And really like zoning in on your learning style as well, right? Like you said, the common ground with hip hop, right? I have to ask because I'm a big hip hop fan. Who's your favorite rapper? I've got to ask.
Oof. How many am I allowed to have in my top 10?
You can have. I tell you what, top 3.
Okay, so top 3, I would. Well, this is cheating because it's a group. But Jurassic 5, growing up, was always one of my favorite hip hop, just because the lyricism, the wordplay, and the beats also behind it. I'm hopefully going to be able to see Cut Chemist, their DJ, this summer in LA. Then it's very difficult. I guess it's kind of a 2-for-1 because the Biggie and Tupac debate, depending on the day of the week or what kind of mood you're in or what you're looking for. If you're looking for that, hard, like concrete, like New York style, you're going to go with Biggie. If you're looking for something perhaps a little bit more philosophical or on the political side, you're going to be thinking about Tupac. Anyway, we should probably have another podcast episode just focused on that.
I really go on.
And there's one more if I can go for a steal also because there's a lot of really great underrated UK rappers. And one of my favorite hip hop groups to come out of the UK is Four Owls from the record label called High Focus. Really, really good lyricism, super great beats. So yeah, that's a fun group too for me.
Okay, well, I'm a Wu-Tang guy, right? We'll talk about this offline, right? I could
Yeah.
imagine us sinking a few pints over this, right? But yeah, I think we're a similar age. Anyway, so let's circle back to tech. I really love the segue though. So you got hit right with the Kubernetes bug, and I loved that you called it the orchestration wars, right? Because essentially Kubernetes won, right? Like there was Docker, there was a few others, blah blah blah. Was that your first like gateway into tech? I mean, that's a pretty, I've not heard that too often, right? When people say, well, do you know what? The first platform, I was using containers, right? You were saying, how was that, right? Like, I mean, because you must have come into it with a fairly unbiased opinion, right? I mean, Kubernetes confused a lot of infrastructure folks, right? It did with me. Is it a hypervisor? Isn't it a hypervisor? Blah 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 blah. What is it for you, right? What was the turning point when you started to like realize how it was useful and how it was going to be used, or was you just like, this works, it's serving a purpose?
That's a great question. And it's something I've spoken about on numerous occasions because sometimes I feel like I might give people the impression that for me, it's like, if you're not going to be using Kubernetes, like I don't even know why we should be talking, but I really don't take that position. It's not about fanaticism for me. It's about based on your objectives, which technology is going to make the most sense, and then that's what's going to work best for you. I will say that I've realized, over time that a lot of the passion and attachment that can go into this technology or that technology can be for different reasons. In my position, particularly when working for this startup, they knew, okay, we're a startup. We can't guarantee, long-term benefits. It's quite likely that we'll either, fizzle out, get acquired, or if we're really lucky, things are going to go super well. So, and we don't have necessarily the clearest roadmap in terms of building product and things like that. But what can we attract talent with? Well, we attract talent by offering the best technologies that they're not going to find in other places. And certainly where I live in Bilbao, the company that I was working at that time in 2017, 2018, the technologies they were using were still light years ahead of a lot of technologies being used by lots of companies nowadays, where I live. And because, there's a bit of a delay in terms of adoption in Spain. So that, the technology being used was a way to attract and keep, some of the best developers that didn't care that the company didn't have the greatest future ahead of it. But in the meantime, they were going to be able to use things that they would normally never get access to. So there's an element of that. But like as you mentioned, I come into it with different eyes and a different approach. Not being someone who's faced with the pressure of if I go with this one or if I go with that one. But that's something that very much we try to use in the QFM podcast is asking people about which Kubernetes emerging tools they're keeping an eye on, because if we're going to take the example of GitOps, if you're looking at more deeply at Argo, well, why not Flux? What are the trade-offs? There are always going to be trade-offs. And so depending on your use case, on your objectives, you're going to go with one or another and have to try to defend that. So that'll be part of it. And then in addition is all the non-technical aspects that go into the decision-making processes to figure out which technology is going to be best. And sometimes you have lack of information sharing and sharing information in companies so that, one dev center has leverage over another. There can be a lot of, Game of Thrones political factors that get involved there too. And that's something that I've always found very interesting as it affects organizations. And when you have different cultures working together and people that are working not just in different programming languages, but spoken languages, having, being working in an international environment, but living in Spain, seeing those different challenges, that's where I started to realize like, okay, there are a lot of technical aspects where I'm never going to be the leader, but there are other aspects where I can use other skills that I have and where it can make a difference.
Yeah, like pick your battles, right? And diplomacy, right? It's like what you just said, right? The Game of Thrones analogy is a great one. Um, I find that a lot. People spend a lot of time with the pros and cons when actually probably a better way of looking at it is we need to ship something. Is it good enough to meet the business requirement? Because effectively that's who you're answering to, right? Like, so analysis paralysis, I've seen days, if weeks wasted for naming conventions, right? Like that's normally the first hurdle, right? What's the name of the resource to, what actually is the tech are we going to be using? So yeah, I like that approach a lot. So if we fast forward a little bit, how did you transition from the startup then to like start creating content? Obviously, you had the YouTube channel, right? You were doing a life of the day of Bart, right? Living in Spain, that kind of thing. But like, how did it transition to like technical content, the Cube FM podcast, that kind of thing?
It was very scary and very stressful. I'm not gonna lie. When I left the company that I was working at for 3 years, and I was making good money, I was doing cool stuff, but I just wasn't happy with. I just didn't see eye to eye with some of the changes that were happening in the role that I had, and also started to realize that it didn't matter kind of what I did, that it was just kind of going unnoticed. And so I kind of just walked out into the wilderness and decided, okay, I'm going to do what I was doing, but now I'm going to do it for different companies. Well, I had established a network because of organizing meetups and larger scale events. So I met lots of companies in the local ecosystem, and they were the first ones that came to me when I left saying, hey, maybe we can talk about doing some work together. I got into video production more deeply because of someone that a friend of mine that I met at the kickboxing gym that I was going to, and we had been working on videos for not just for tech companies, but for lots of different companies. But because I was very much involved in events, that was in a friend like a healthy overlap when I got started as a freelancer. But it was a nightmare. I did not take into account, billable hours, didn't explain things to customers clearly in the beginning about what they could expect in terms of deliveries, when I was going to be available. So I found myself working tons of hours for not a lot of money and having to reconsider, like, is this a good idea? What am I doing? I didn't have a lot of mentors from other freelancers, and that's something that I always recommend to people if they're thinking about doing that. You should definitely establish a network of other folks that are doing something that's somewhat similar. But in the beginning, that was quite tough, and it was something that after maybe the first year and a half or two, I was like, I don't know if this is really going to be for me. I continued also. I had a quite diverse range of different things that I did, including teaching entrepreneurs pitching for when they're going to speak to investors or different events. So that was a way to stay in touch with different areas, and then those things were sort of fed off of each other. But it was really hard. And then it was the big shift into doing a lot more content specifically focused on Kubernetes was because of the pandemic. So in 2020, I was given the opportunity to start leading the data on Kubernetes community, which when I got started was 120 people in a Slack channel. There was one company that was sponsoring it called Maya Data that was acquired, and they had an open source project that they were backing in the CNCF ecosystem called OpenEBS around container attached storage. And so they wanted to have a community to generate more awareness around this paradigm. And because running stateful workloads in 2020 was not only very difficult, but very much not really supported by a lot of people, because Kelsey Hightower had a long-standing opinion around you shouldn't run stateful workloads on Kubernetes. Kubernetes was designed for stateless workloads, and this is just too complex. There are too many risks. And there are different, there's also the talent problem. Do you have technical staff that have the necessary skills to be able to do this? There were a lot of doubts around it. So I was tasked with starting to find different people in the ecosystem who would be willing to come and do a live stream, sort of online meetup where people could ask questions and interact and be able to see some code. But it was around an area that was day 2 operations on Kubernetes, very technically challenging for seasoned practitioners. And then I found myself in a position of trying to navigate all this and outreach. So what I knew it was going to be challenging, but I knew also that in order to attract more people to our community, we needed to be, a phrase that I often use is, easy to remember and hard to forget. And it was at that point where I realized that I had a lot of support particularly from Evan Powell, who is the CEO of Maya Data. He's now doing some really cool stuff around machine learning and cybersecurity in a company called Deep Tempo. And he very much supported, doing things that were more creative. So we started blending art, we started bringing music. I started writing raps for all the guests that we had on our live stream. And that also became a bit of a task because we started doing 2 to 3 live streams per week, which meant that I had to write a lot of rap lyrics. I was producing my own hip hop beats, or I'd find others. And this is in the days before ChatGPT, so it wasn't as simple as just throwing a bunch of words into something and having it be written for you. but it was something that gave us a unique identity, and also to creating a learning community where people could be celebrating the fact of we're doing something challenging, where we're doing it together, connecting with people from all over the world. And it was a place where people could, you know, be reminded that they are people first, and that you're working at a company, and also all those other things second. And that's what I tried to bring to it, and it works. So yeah, but in the beginning, you know, doing live streams, doing podcasts, it was something that was quite overwhelming for me. But having had these different experiences of living in different countries, of trying new things, of doing something for the first time, it made me well equipped to not, you know, die in the attempt.
I mean, that sounds amazing. It sounds like that would have been, you know, my cup of tea, to be quite honest, especially with the rap elements to it as well. But I can attest to that. I I did a YouTube. I started a YouTube channel with a good friend of mine, Robin Smorenberg, in the Netherlands when I was in the UK.
Shout out to him. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
you know
great.
Robin,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yep.
and we mandated that every episode was going to be a live stream, right? We didn't understand what we got ourselves into, right? We were like complete novices, and like there was so much stuff that could go wrong with every session, right? The intricacies, just even the technical setup, right, wasn't even easy, and testing tools and making sure the guests were all right, and then actually making sure that people turned up and, like you said, right, like got involved. Was a challenge. It is a real challenge. It is tough, right? Because you're like, you're both like sat there going, is this gonna work? Is this gonna work? Right? So kudos to that. I mean, yeah, building a community during the pandemic as well, and at least you can go multinational with that, right? Because before that, there was a lot of like, I know in the UK it was like this. In big cities there was meetups, but then when the pandemic happened, it all sort of shifted to online, right? So are you still seeing that? Is it still online? Like I tried to run, as we talked about before, like in-person meetups, and they're starting to come back, but you effectively got to bribe people to come down, right? That's
It's been really tough. And
yeah,
for people that had done, you know, meetups prior to the pandemic, and where you'd see, you know, great turnout, and you wouldn't see, you know, a 70% drop off of signups versus people that would actually show up. And it was because when doing the data on Kubernetes community, we had done all these online encounters, but we decided in 2022, like, hey, it's probably a good idea if we start doing things, you know, offline in person. And the first place that actually started doing meetups was in London. But convincing people to stay after work or to go to another place in person with restrictions changing all the time and things like that, it meant that 80% of the people who were probably there were employees of the company that was sponsoring it. And then the other folks that would come would be friends of the speakers or things like that. But it was tough, and I think organizers are still going through that to some degree, just because we got so saturated with online content that, you know, how do you create that incentives for people to go, to say the talks won't be recorded, there's going to be a book signing, there's going to be something that's kind of extra in order to get people to attend. I think the other thing is just having to be realistic about what good metrics are. I'll also say this, you know, yeah, you can give away free beer and pizza, but I've been at meetups that have had 5 people that have had much more meaningful conversations and a stronger impact than ones that have had 150 people because there were swag giveaways or things like that. So I think that, yes, organizers, we always want to have the best metrics possible, or whether it's on a YouTube live stream or on an in-person meetup. But you got to be real. You got to be realistic with what you're working with, the demand for the topics that you're speaking about, and, you know, what the definition of success looks like. The other factor is whether it's diet and exercise or running a community, it's about consistency. So, you know, showing up again and again, even when it hurts, even when those metrics are painful, where you feel like you're letting down the speaker, even though you promote it as much as humanly possible, but it coincides that there is a major sports event on the same day, or the weather changes, or lots of other things that can happen. It's tough, but it's about showing up consistently and you know, sticking to your goals.
I've made all of those mistakes, literally. Hockey's a big thing here in Canada, and I did an event when the local hockey team was playing, and people left halfway through with their jerseys on. I was like, right, I need to check the calendar next time, right? But do you know what I found is working? Because we had the same problem. We were like saying to everyone, we're doing this for you guys, but if you don't turn up, then it's a struggle for me to keep the squad motivated, right? We do hackathons now. That's pretty much what we do. So we get a new piece of cloud native tech and we do a hackathon, and the buy-in has been tremendous, because what happens is they all sit together and they're learning a new piece of technology. Like, we've got a Dagger night coming up, right? So people are like, what's Dagger? I'm like, well, you're gonna love it, right? And they're like, okay. So they're gonna come in. We built a repo and a container image and everything else to get them up and running with Dagger, and they're going to build and hack stuff, right? And talk to each other. And they've never been exposed to that. And we're seeing that working quite a lot, right? I think if you bring in more collaboration, more of a learning and doing, starting to see more of an uptake in that, rather than me talking for 45 minutes about whatever it is on a PowerPoint presentation, right? Like that's got to be the differentiator there. But yeah, it's been a weird one. Even with people being mandated to return to the office, that kind of thing. Like you said, dragging people after work. Enjoy the
Not a great
sunshine,
look.
or come and hear us speak for a while, right? It's a pretty tough one.
And feeling like it's an invitation, but also that it's going to be frowned upon if you don't go. That creates an unhealthy culture at work.
Yeah,
don't do that. I would like to echo what you said though about more of group learning. I have different family members that are educators, and we've had conversations about this, that the best teaching environments is where the teacher provides the context and the tools that are necessary, but it's that the students end up teaching each other is generally the most successful environments you can find, because people bring in different experiences, people have different ways of learning. And then it's not this sort of monologue of, like you said, that I'm the one doing the talking and it's your job to be doing the learning. But when people then assume the role of the teacher and going through that process together, I often find, whether it's tech or anything else, often much more rewarding experiences.
Yeah, it does work. Like, that's how we scale as well. We sort of have like the guidelines on the front board kind of thing, and then it's like we're walking around, right, trying to nurture people, and they're going through the steps. There's nowhere to hide as well, right? So they're not just sat there with that glazed
Your sound
look.
cut out. Sorry.
Is my sound back? Is it
Or
back?
mine?
I can still hear you.
Let's try this. Shouldn't be mine. I can do this without headphones.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can.
Right. We'll cut that out.
Hold on. Let's see if these want to cooperate. I don't know about that.
How about that?
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Cool.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that, folks. Technical glitches. This is why I don't live stream anymore. But yeah. So how did you, if we talk about your CNCF journey, you said you took on some community, taking charge of some of the projects going on there. How did that come about? Because I remember a few years back, there was a flurry of like people getting CNCF ambassadorships, right? Before that, I didn't really realize, like, I thought the CNCF was just a custodian of technology stacks, right? A bit like the Linux Foundation. But then it sort of grew more and more, right? And then there's obviously KubeCon, right? And some larger events and that kind of thing. But yeah, your perspective, how did you sort of get into the CNCF world, right? And start mixing?
Yeah. So my CNCF journey was because of being in the Data on Kubernetes community. Like I said, learned a lot about OpenEBS and the different challenges around getting end users adoption, things like that, to be getting folks to go out and say, yes, we're using this technology, and we are Flipkart, massive e-commerce provider in India, or different organizations around the world. But I knew nothing about the ambassador program until it was early 2021, and I was encouraged by other ambassadors to apply, and I never would have applied if they hadn't told me to. And I didn't really know what it was going to involve or what would be expected of me. And I didn't get accepted the first time I applied, so I applied again, and I explained, that what I was doing was that, running this community and all the content that we were creating, things like that. And then I got in. And then since then, yeah, one of the best parts I often say about being an ambassador is that it accelerates the process of interacting with other ambassadors, who are people, like yourself, who are very, very active in terms of getting people together, sharing ideas, helping other people grow. So that's been my favorite part of it. And so yeah, I've been able to participate in different things, whether it's helping to organize KCDs, whether it's recording videos with different speakers to promote events, to speak to attendees who are maybe attending for the first time, to be organizing mentoring sessions. There's a lot. It's a lot of it's like it's sort of the thing of, well, what do I need to do? Well, what are you good at, and what are the things that you're already doing? Well, and just sort of channel them in this direction. And so we often tell people that are considering applying to be an ambassador is that you shouldn't really do new things to become an ambassador. It's mostly just an extension of the work that you're already doing. So if you're an active community person, this is something that'll just probably come naturally. And there are lots of ways to contribute without being an ambassador as well. So don't feel like it's the only way to do it. But for me, it's been a very positive experience for the last 4 years. I've learned a lot. It's allowed me to connect with people from all over the world. And that's what I realized too, is that it's a space where I found that I can plug in creative things that perhaps I wasn't able to exercise as freely at other points in my life. And also the passion and enjoyment for being around people from other countries and cultures that are different from my own, and really just being able to learn a ton. I feel very lucky to be able to do what I do.
Yeah, I echo a lot of that. For me, I didn't set off to become an ambassador, right? It was sort of just came about, and what really attracted me about the CNCF was that it was like neutral territory, right? Because if you work for big tech organizations, right, you sometimes don't have the freedom to collaborate, right, with other people from other tech companies, right, because of competition and all that good stuff. Luckily, the company I work for, kudos to them. Technically, they just want to be friends with everybody, right? Like that's normally what I get, right? But I know not everywhere's like that. But what I really found when I sort of got into the ecosystem, like I didn't even realize there was a community Slack and everything else, was I really found my people, and it really expanded it globally, right? And everyone's approachable and friendly on there. I've not met a single person, right? And I've learned a lot, because there's everything from early in careers to people that are more like more senior and have different perspectives, and you go to them with, I don't know, you maybe you need guidance on something, and they just spat out something, and within 2 minutes the problem's solved because they've seen it or they've done it, right? That's what I found a lot of as well. I found it to be very very welcoming community there, right? So yeah, I completely echo that. But I'm keen to see what's next. I don't know about you, right? With what's going on, I feel like we've reached a momentum with the CNCF, and it just seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? But is there anything that you're excited about which is coming out of the CNCF that you want to talk about?
I think it's great to see. Well, like you said, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's pretty difficult to stay on top of all the things that are happening. But in terms of things that I've seen, seeing KubeCon in India last year in December, that was really, really good because of having been interacting with so many people, whether it's contributors, maintainers, companies from India, as well as the surrounding countries, to be able to have something there where it's not so difficult, not so costly, and also things around visa issues that folks face oftentimes traveling to the United States and Europe. So that was really good, and was able to attend that in person, and hoping to go back to Hyderabad in August. Also, seeing the KubeCons in China and Japan is a very good sign. And also, whether it's KCDs or Cloud Native Days happening in different parts of the world, I'm going to be heading out to Guatemala on June 10th for KCD Guatemala there, having participated, but in an online capacity in previous editions. So I think that's really good, is that, celebrating the global nature of the CNCF and the different people that are participating and that are free to do so. Obviously, English is our common language, but I think it's great to have content in as many different languages as possible. Also, as a Spanish speaker, it's a nice opportunity to be able to use that. So I think that's that's I would say the community side of things. Lots of other things there too in terms of mentorship programs and things like that. On the technical side, I think it seemed like it came up this in a big way in KubeCon Paris, but even though AI had been discussed over the last several years, in the Data on Kubernetes community, we were speaking about, what are we, ML and AI workloads making their way onto Kubernetes, but this is, now at a much bigger scale. And I think in the beginning it was maybe, I can think a fair amount of it may have been related to, hype train and not wanting to be, left behind. But now is trying to see like in a meaningful sense, how are these two things coming together? And a lot of people still tell me that it's very much early days. We do see projects in the CNCF like Kate's GPT or KitOps that are also now making their way into their sandbox projects and the AI working group. So like I said, all those things are healthy. There's so much happening. It's like I said, it's difficult to keep track
very,
of.
very large,
Yeah.
right? Like everyone's seen the diagram, right? Like the meme behind the diagram, but it is pretty large. But I feel like, what you're probably touching on is something for everybody, right? So, I mean, the mentorship programs are a pretty good one, right? Like, I mean, that's even in our, that's something that we're encouraged to do as well. So, like, if you're in a town or a city, and it could be anywhere, literally, right? And you're looking for a mentorship, go and check out your local CNCF group, right? That's a great place to start for mentorship. But there's also mentorship programs online as well, right? I believe so. It's a great place to get started, especially if, like I said before, touching on that neutrality is, you're going to be using a tech stack or learning tech stack potentially that can be used on any platform, typically, right? So it's a good place. Okay, so we're getting up towards the end of the show. What would be, I'm going to ask you, it's a bit of a pressing question here, but I ask every guest this. What are your top 3 skills that people should focus on for 2025?
I think everyone, regardless of their age, should take a step back and reflect on what can I do that AI can't, and particularly in this area. And so what are the things that you can do? Let's say that you can't have access to technology for a day or a week or whatever it happens to be. What are the things that you as a person can offer? And whether it's you're good at fixing things, that you're a good communicator, that you're a good listener, really double down on all those skills, because AI can help those things, but it's always thinking about what's the added value. Like the increasing amount of stuff that's coming out about AI agents and a threat to people's jobs, or that's another debate. But I think 2025 should be a year where we really reflect on what are the things that we can do as people. And it's interesting, actually, this study came out about that I forget which major financial institution it was, but they're more interested in hiring people that had humanities degrees because of their problem solving, their ways of thinking, than someone that would just be studying purely hard skills. And so I think that it's a really good time to think about, what are the things that you can do that, an AI assistant or an LLM can't. And so like I said, the different things that would go in there that, and we see this time and time again, and asking, because I talk to a lot of people in the Kubernetes ecosystem, the vast majority of problems are not technical ones. Despite the major technical challenges that we face, the biggest problems are around egos, on a lack of understanding, on a lack of cooperation. So I think empathy, communication, those things can simply not be underrated, and they're not necessarily the most easily taught. And it certainly I think it involves a lot of humility and reflection to dig deeper on those things. And so I really encourage people to think about that more.
That's a common response from a lot of our guests, right? They always start off with the soft skills and the perception of it. Like, technical skills can be taught, but it's more about the human interaction side of it, right? And yeah, like a few years back, I was on like an induction at Microsoft, and this new person started, and she came. We had to enter like this team chat room, and she said, "I've just started," and I went, "Oh, great! Where did you come from?" Expecting for some tech ground, and she went, "I was a vet." I said, "You were a vet, right?" I said, "That's wild, right?" I said, "You're probably going to be better at this than I am." She was like, "Why?" I said, "Because you can talk to people and you've got like a caring nature straight away, right?" Well, for me, I'm used to just like looking at a computer screen, right, or interacting with my code all day, right? So I said, like, you've got some superpowers right there. So yeah, she's doing very well still, by the way. So like, she was completely blown away that she got a job at Microsoft, right? So to your point, you know,
No,
it
and I
works.
encourage people to really embrace those things, and that's also why, in the past when I'd be doing job interviews, interviewing people for open positions, be more interested in finding out about their side projects and things like that because it says a lot more about them as a person than necessarily where they studied or maybe even previous employers. So I really, encourage people, don't shy away from those things and don't feel like they're irrelevant because there's tons of relevance in terms of things you're doing in your day to day. It's just a question how are you going to make the link between one thing and the other.
Great way to spot people's passions as well, because if they're doing it on the side, it means they really care about it, right? So that's awesome. Okay. Um, so I like to finish things off with a sort of quick fire round, with some, more humorous questions and more story questions. But yeah, so what is your favorite operating system of all time?
I'm gonna cheat name too because you have a is that a Apple Macintosh Classic behind
I'm
you?
a convert. Do you know how many? That's such a conversation starter, right? So yeah, like I love the whole the Apple law. Is that even a thing? But like, I don't know because like the way they designed things, especially in the early days in the 80s and the 90s, like it was completely different from like the IBM like printouts that you would get. So like I've been a Windows guy all my life, but I've always had a soft spot for Unix and Linux, and yeah, now Apple, right? So yeah, that's what I've been doing on the side is restoring that Apple. I had to look back, but yeah, that Apple II, right? So
Yeah, that's the thing is that was the first computer that we had growing up, and I don't my parents are not terribly technological. It's very difficult to do FaceTime with them. I hope they listen to this, but my dad knew that this is going to be important, and so that was our first computer, and then our second computer was actually IBM, and it was with our second that we first got dial up, internet. And there were a lot of things that were really important about that at that time. And since I was the youngest in my family, just kind of seen as like, well, you've had typing classes in school, you've had basic computer classes in school as well. And so anytime there was something technological, I would be seen as the person who would be responsible for setting up. And it just says a lot more about my family as being technologically inept than anything else. But yeah, so I would definitely go back to that. And then I would say also too, just seeing it as such a turning point at an age where I didn't know what was going on. When I was 10 years old, Windows 95 came out, so
oh
that would be my other response. Yeah.
oh yeah, that was my personally first computer, right? It was a compact Presario, and I remember my dad. I nagged him, and he come back and he switched it on, and it used to play that. I'm not. I'm just gonna. I was gonna actually. I was actually gonna hum the intro sound, right? But like, it was mind blowing, right? You had like the internet, Doom, right? That was really important, and then right, and that kind of thing, and like yeah, like stuff that you saw in movies that were being done in offices were now being done at home, like printing and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, Windows 95 is a good one. Okay. So where can folks find you, Bart? I mean, it's not very hard. If you just go into LinkedIn and type out his name, it's pretty easy to find him. But where's the best place to try and find you? Get in
Yeah,
touch.
LinkedIn's definitely the best place or the easiest one. CNCF Slack, Kubernetes Slack, either one of those. I'm still on X, though I use it less and less, and also on Blue Sky. You can find me there. Bart Farrell, Birthmark Bart. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any parting words that you've got for the listeners?
For the listeners, my biggest thing always has been, if I can do it, you can too. And to really, it's a cliche, but like the only fear you should have is fear itself. So I wouldn't, things may take longer than you'd like, but whatever it is that you really want to be doing is not as far away as you think it is. You are the biggest obstacle between yourself and the things that you want to be doing or the life that you want to be having. It takes time, and it takes more time than all of us would like, but I do think the struggle is beautiful, and there's so much you can learn along the way that don't take no from an answer, and certainly not from yourself.
That's awesome. Words of wisdom right there. Okay, well, thank you, Bart, for coming on the show. Again, thanks to our listeners, and we'll catch you on the next one. So goodbye for now.
Wu Tang Clan to be continued. Thanks so much.